Okay. Hey everyone, we are live, and I am with Pawan and Anton from the Arena Solutions. So we are live on both LinkedIn and YouTube. So again, hi everyone. Maybe Pawan, Anton, say hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
So really nice to see you all here. So we're here for the office hours of the Predictive AI Hackathon. I think Anton has an elaborate demo, and we'll take all questions in the chat. Again, if you're on YouTube, you can just comment down in the chat, and we'll take your questions one by one. Okay, I can see a few people already on the chat. Hello, hi Vipin. So I'll just get started. So Pawan, what brings us to this event? What are we gonna do?
So we're going to talk about the app competition that we are running for the predictive AI apps. And really the idea behind scheduling this office hours was because there was a lot of questions about, what is predictive AI? How does it convert to generative? But more importantly, like exactly what the requirements of the competition are. So this is an open session. It's going to be very tech heavy. We wanted to kind of do a hands-on exercise, but at the same time, all questions are welcome. So we are looking forward to addressing any questions.
Excellent. So, from the participants, again, you can let us know in the comments, where you're from, what you're doing, or just, what you plan to build. Now, Anton, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can. I didn't expect this. I guess I thought there would be a little bit more of an introduction about maybe like the contest, etc. But I didn't prepare an
Yeah,
introduction.
yeah, yeah. That's completely
So
fine. I mean,
okay, then
pa-
yeah, we can dive right in. So I guess you're sharing my screen to the people now, or
yep, we can go straight into your screen.
okay, yeah. So as we said, we're doing this live demo for the competition. We do have a similar video explaining all these steps as well on our YouTube channel. But yeah, this is, if you want to follow along, I'm going to try to go slowly. If you have any questions, just post them away. Just post them, and Sidharth will just stop me whenever you think is right. Yeah. So I have VS Code over here. I'm going to be doing everything in JavaScript. I understand people may be using different languages. If you're using .NET, Python, I think as long as you understand the concepts I'm talking about, it should be fairly easy to translate what I'm doing into your programming language. And then once it comes time to the front end, it's just going to be JavaScript, and 99% of all things front end is JavaScript.
All right. So
So
in that quick insight. So someone from the comments has asked, how does MeldRx Smart and CDS weave together? So I think it would be
yeah,
good to just talk a little bit about this. Take this question, and then we'll carry on.
yes. So MeldRx is a FHIR server first platform. You can effectively create your own workspace, which is a FHIR server and is also a CDS service as well. Uh, for the purposes of this demo, MeldRx will function as the EHR, which is going to support CDS services and present the CDS cards. Uh, Effectively, you could have any EHR start supporting this standard, and it's a way to get your application into the EHR and extend the functionality of that EHR. How all of that is going to happen, I guess you will see throughout this tutorial. But yeah, effectively, you have your EHR, you call the CDS service, you present a card, and then I guess the smart part of it is the card is capable of doing a smart launch of your application. So it's a way to get your smart launch link into the EHR and, well, effectively launch your app from the EHR. And yeah, if they support, I guess they can also support like launch this app as a regular button, but that button is always going to be there. But now with CDS hooks, you get kind of like you can effectively evaluate some logic and say, you want to launch this app, here is the link based on these conditions. If that makes sense. Any more questions?
That does. I mean, we have other people just getting started with FHIR, CDA. I think we can carry on with the demo, Anton.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to start with the simplest thing. I do have VS Code open. I'm not going to be writing code just yet. I'm just going to explain a little bit on the MailDirect side what is happening. If you don't have, it will be quite handy to have the CDS hooks specification open. I'm going to be referring to it just to explain where I'm getting this information from. And I'm also going to have the FHIR specification open over here. Probably want version R4 as well. So as I said, MailDirect is a FHIR first service. So you make an account, you can effectively just go into workspaces. You would create your standalone workspace, and I will name this CDS service live demo. Okay, I'll create this workspace, and there we have it. So I effectively now have my own FHIR server. Now, for this competition, we are running a Discord server, and on the Discord server, you will have a pinned comment, and maybe it will be worth going in there real quick. I have a bunch of other channels, but here is the Discord server that we have. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. And in the app competition, we do have this FHIR bundle pinned over here, so you can find it. So once you download the zip, you're gonna get this folder over here, which has a bunch of FHIR bundles, which you can upload to the FHIR server. And then you also have a README inside of here, which tells you what to do with these bundles. And if you have any problems, you can always reach out. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and follow the steps. Effectively, first give the first two uploads. So upload some hospital and practitioner information. So one bundle, then practitioner information, second bundle, and then a couple of patients. So all I'm effectively doing at this point is preloading data into a FHIR server. Okay. Cool. So 2 patients could be enough. There we have it. So we have Ardoth 226 and Alvin 56. At this point, you're effectively acting as the provider. So you are looking at patients in your EHR, and then once you click on a patient, you are looking, again, you're using the EHR to look at a patient, and at this point, we trigger the patient view hook. So this is, again, referring to the CDS hooks specification. On the, and again, I'll try and make this a little bit bigger. On the left-hand side here, you have hooks. The number next to the hooks speaks to their maturity level as to how evolved they are. So 5, I think, is the final maturity level. Okay, so they're named hooks. If the word hook doesn't stick in your brain, you can think of it as an event. An event is happening in an EHR system. You want to do something based on this event. Okay, so patient view is an event that happens once you go to view a patient, which is what's happening at this point. The alerts tab over here is where we would want to display the CDS hook cards. Okay, and then I guess to kind of, we would display the cards here, and I want to kind of say we have critical, warning, and information. The reason we have these 3 columns is because if you look in the CDS specification to maybe, we're going to jump somewhere further, card attributes. So you can see that a card has an indicator. Is it an information card? Is it a warning? Is it a critical? And we display these in the appropriate columns based on the card indicator. Okay.
A quick answer to a question on the chat. So we have Alosh asking, just to be clear, can we get the same data that you had using Cynthia as well?
Yeah, I think we use Cynthia to generate these.
That data was actually generated using Cynthia. So absolutely. And that's what we recommend. If you have a particular use case, you can absolutely go to Cynthia and get that data.
Yes, Alosh. So it's Cynthia. It's just in a zip, so it makes it easier on the Discord channel.
Cool. So coming back to this, so yeah, you're effectively in an EHR and you want you're raising an event when you're using the EHR. Particularly in this instance, we're opening a patient and we're triggering the patient view event. Other hooks here: order assign, order select, order dispatch. Some of these are not too evolved, and for some of these we just don't have well, effectively the interface or functions to operate them, right? But we have the full FHIR backend, so over time we'll probably get there and build this. But for now, patient view is all we have. So now we know that once we open a patient, the patient view hook gets triggered. We want to effectively send this event out to a CDS hook service. And the way that you would do this with a workspace is in the extensions part. You would go to workspace extensions and you would register a new extension. So you have the service URL here. You have the upload CQL Elm files and custom CQL builder that we have here. You effectively could evaluate some for those that are familiar with CQL. It's effectively an expression that you can run over some FHIR data, and it would evaluate to something, and based on those results, you can then display the appropriate card. I know that is very generically speaking because we're not going to be diving into this, but know that that is possible. You can do things based on evaluated expressions in CQL rather than custom logic in your programming language. Okay. So here we have
Anton, just real quick. So we have a question from Michelle. So the 7 hooks that are listed on the CDS hooks website, are they the only ones currently available? So now again, I'm going to also give you some context. Like for the hackathon participants, can they use any of the other hooks apart from patient view?
So for the hackathon, we want people to integrate with EHRs because we support only patient view. That's the only thing that we support. They could potentially build something against other hooks, but they would not be able to demonstrate that functionality using EHRs. They would have to effectively call that endpoint using Postman or something like that.
So Michelle, just to add more, I think, this is available in the CDS hooks spec, but then MELDRX hasn't, we are only supporting patient view for the time being. But Pawan, it's a question to you as well, I guess. What about participants who want to use another hook that's not patient view?
Yeah, so we are actually evaluating others, like how we want to expose it right now. The idea was, as we have built it, that it will actually work with any EHR, and there are not many EHRs that are supporting, even CDS hooks today. So the architecture here is that if you wanted to use it from another EHR, we actually do an EHR launch, and then we basically use the hook. So if you have a use case that uses any of the other hooks, please reach out to us. We are definitely interested in finding those use cases and working on it. Right now, we are basically trying to focus more on the patient view because that's the most common one. But if you have a use case, would love to talk to you how it is, and we can definitely fit it into the competition definition.
Got it. So for the participants, you can use other hooks if you want it, and just reach out and confirm with us before you completely build things. You're not limited to just the patient view for this competition.
Yeah, and again, the reason for that was because we wanted to align with what will work with most of the EHRs. That's kind of why we have it made as the first priority. But if you're building it, let's talk. Definitely, very interested to talk.
Got it. All right, back to Anton.
Yeah, so coming back here, what I wanted to point out is how you would register a hook with a workspace. Here is one of the very simple CDS hooks. I'll just go to the URL here, and we'll actually jump back to the specification all the way to the top. The CDS hooks specification defines the CDS hook service, and one of the service endpoints is going to be whatever the URL is, /CDS services is the discovery endpoint, which is where we're landing here. And you can see the CDS services that are available here. Okay. Patient greeting. The idea of this service is patient greeting. So we can go ahead and select this one. And effectively, this is the URL that we're registering here. Okay. So this URL, this service. So I left out the P there. I'll do patient greeting. So at this point, we would just register the extension. This extension now exists. Now you want to manage extensions in a sense of that I want to turn it on, I want to turn it off, I want to enable it for this provider, that provider, etc. At this point, once you've registered the extension, you would have to go and enable it. Let me close this. And we would go and select this extension and activate it for this workspace. Okay. So in workspace extensions, you manage them, and activate extensions, you would activate this extension. Now that this extension is activated, I can go back to the patient chart. And again, because I'm opening a patient, this would trigger the event. And this is where we are now sending, in the background, we're sending off the data to the CDS service. It is returning a card, and we're displaying this card. Okay. So the main job of the participants is to build the CDS hook service, which is also perhaps doing a smart launch. So we're going to be in this demo effectively building a CDS hook service, but in addition to that, we are going to have a button as well. All right. So one thing to point out here is every single workspace you create, whatever extensions, CDS hook extensions you register with it, you have an API for those CDS services. Okay, so your workspace now contains this hook, and it's a proxy to that one. So your workspace can contain proxies to other CDS services or CQL, internal CQL files that we host and we evaluate, or potentially in the future some other options, maybe akin to a cloud function or something like that. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that you have an endpoint that even if you may create a system app, you can use this as a backend to call and supply. Well, effectively, it's a full-fledged CDS service. And I guess to the point where if you are going to go off and build other hooks, this could be just a proxy to forward the request onto your CDS service. Okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and try to build our own service. So I'm going to come back to the code. And in here, I have the terminal. I don't know if everybody can just say yes or no, if you can see everything correct, good, or you want me to make the screen a little bit bigger.
A bit bigger won't hurt. Also, let us know in the comments if you think it's okay for you. For those viewing on YouTube, just put your thoughts in the comment.
Okay. So let's say maybe actually, yeah, CDS service. So here I just have a folder. I'm going to go into the folder and I'm going to initialize a Node.js project. I'm not going to bother with any of the information there. It's all going to be default, all good. Okay. So that's just going to give me a package.json. So it's effectively just a project definition. If you are in the .NET world, this is akin to your CSproj file. If you're Python, this can be your TOML file, that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm going to install a dependency for Express, and I'm going to be using Express to just build an API. Okay, so node modules. So here are all the dependencies and the JavaScript code required for Express to run. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, index.js, and let's go ahead and try to build a very, very small Express application, right? So Express, I think you do something like this. App listen on, what do we want? I'll just do 4433. And in the callback function, I'm just going to say console log started. So let me just verify that the application is starting. To do this, I would use the node tool. So node is, I guess, very similar to if I would just type Python. It's just an application that is capable of running JavaScript. Okay. And there we go. So it's starting. I don't have any endpoints yet, but the web server is starting. Okay, so let's get a very, very simple endpoint where I have a path, just / and I have a request and a response. And to the response, I will just send hello world. Okay, so I'll start this and come back here. Yeah, let's go to localhost 4433. And there we go. So here's hello world. Now all I have to do is build an API that is CDS hook spec compliant. Okay, so I can start off with building this discovery endpoint. So CDS service. Instead of sending this, I would want to return JSON. And in terms of what do we return? Well, the spec has to specify it, and it does, right? So the response from your CDS service shall be an object that's containing a list of services, right? So an object with a property services, and that should be an array, okay? So I'll give this object that I'm returning a property of services, and it's going to be an array, and it's an array of CDS services. So the CDS services should have the following attributes, and we'll mainly take a look at the required ones, okay? So let's create an object. The first property is hook. So I'll have hook over here, and the hooks, well, the hook that you're specifying here are the ones that are defined on the left here, okay? So this is going to be the patient view hook. We are then, and instead of like pinging back and forth between the bright and the dark ID, to basically stop flashing you all the time, I'll just grab a couple of these. So title is recommended. I'll skip it. We have description and ID that is required. So I'll just do those ones, and then we also have the prefetch, which is optional. So description, ID, and prefetch. Just going to go ahead and transfer those. So ID, description, and prefetch. So ID is a string, description is a string, prefetch is an object, and it goes down into prefetch template. Don't worry if you don't understand prefetch just yet. I will explain it a little bit later. I will leave it as an empty object for now. For the identifier, I will just specify that the hook for this ID is 001, and the description will be, let's say, greet the patient. We're effectively going to recreate the hook that we have just registered. Okay. So here's our discovery endpoint. Let's go ahead and restart the application. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to give this a refresh. There should be no endpoint, but the CDS services
Anton, I think you mixed an S. You put it
Yeah.
CDS service, yeah.
So yeah, I went to CDS services. It's not found, but yeah, I missed an S here. So it's cool. Restart, refresh, and there we have it. So now is the discovery endpoint. Once you go to register the 001 hook, we will be able to fetch it on the MelderX side. We won't be able to call it just yet, though. So in order to make this available to our live service, I am going to use ngrok. Hopefully people are familiar with it, but it's effectively just a tunnel to make whatever I have on localhost available on the wider internet. Okay. So I'm going to create a new terminal here. I'm going to use ngrok. I want to forward HTTP request to support 4433. Okay. Here I will have my link, and maybe make this a little bit bigger. I can see there where it's forwarding to. So if you're not zoomed in like me, you should be able to see this quite easily. I'm going to go ahead, copy this address, put it in the URL, and I'll visit the site. No problem, right? So you can see here I'm getting similar responses to how I would get them before. So let me just get /CDS services on the end here. And I have exactly the same response. Okay. So I'm going to take this URL. I'm going to go into MelderX here, workspace extensions, register a new extension. I'm just going to say that this is my 001 extension. And on the CDS services, I'm going to add my 001 extension. Okay. Register extension. It should register. So even though that we don't have any actual functionality behind actually handling the hook, we're just saying we have it. When you register an extension with a workspace, we do verify that you have this extension that you're specifying in the discovery endpoint. If you don't, it will fail. So for example, if you say...
Quick comment from the chat. Just make your screen a little bigger when you're in your browser. Yeah.
In my browser. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes.
Is that good?
I think it's a little better. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, if you have just a random number there, we will effectively, the CDS service is not going to be found, whichever one you're specifying here. So it has to be something that you are returning on your discovery endpoint. Okay. So here you have your extension 001. You will then want to go ahead and activate this extension. Okay. And at this point, we'll return to this patient view. We'll refresh it. And because the endpoint doesn't work, you're effectively causing an error in the system. Now we're just going to use this as an opportunity to develop our CDS hook. Okay. Some of the errors may be a little bit unclear, but we are actively working on improving that as we're getting feedback from the users of this system. Okay. So this event is being raised. How is our API meant to handle this, right? So there will be the calling a CDS service section in the documentation, where again, on the base URL, CDS service ID, you are meant to make a post request with a JSON payload. Okay. So the payload that we're sending is being handled on the MelderX side. What you need to do is you need to build the part that is capable of receiving this payload. Okay. So coming back to the code, I'm going to just hide the terminal real quick. I'm going to copy this endpoint, and I'm going to go and say that it should be some kind of identifier here. I think that's the way that you represent it here. And you should be able to post this information. Okay. So one thing I will do is, let's say console log, we will log what is our identifier. So in the request parameters, we will have the identifier. And then I will also console log the body that we are sending. Okay. So whatever is being posted to this endpoint, we want to see what is the identifier and what is the body. Currently, basically the spec specifies what kind of data should be returned by the discovery endpoint, and then what kind of data should be returned by the endpoint, which is processing the CDS service. Like over here, you should be returning cards. For now, we will not worry about that. For now, we will just worry about receiving the correct data. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to respond with an empty JSON object, which shouldn't be correct. And this, I'm just expecting this to see in the console. Okay. Oh, and one thing is with the what's it called? With the, I think it's basically you have to add the JSON middleware to an Express application. So I can't remember exactly how you do it. So I'm just going to quickly have a look at it. There we go. So we have app use as a function, and then on the Express object, you have your JSON middleware. Okay. So this effectively now knows how to deserialize the JSON payload that you're posting into the body. If you don't have this in Express, you would get an undefined here. Similar how if, for example, you're in .NET, if you're posting a form or a JSON payload, you might need to specify from form, or you might need to specify from body, right? And perhaps you may need to specify different JSON serializers. Okay. So got my JSON handling middleware. I got this. Let's go ahead and bring the terminal back where I'm running my CDS hook application. I'm going to go ahead and restart it. I'm going to come back to the browser over here. I'm going to give this a refresh. You're going to see we don't have an error because the response that we effectively returned is empty. So we didn't find any cards that you should have returned. But if we come back to the code in the console, we'll see that we are hitting this endpoint with the identifier, and we are supplying some information. Okay. You do get the patient identifier. We don't give you any token or anything like that to call our FHIR server, although according to the CDS hook specification, that is possible. A big caveat in that is that you're going to make an HTTP call to the CDS service. You're going to give them the FHIR server, the authentication, and then you have to go and call the FHIR server. And web calls basically take some time. If you line up enough web calls, it's going to take like maybe a second, 2 seconds. If you have 10 cards that you want to display and everything is calling each other, it might be a little bit, it might impact performance effectively. And this is something that a lot of people who are working or are in the CDS service or CDS hook space, they're all stressing about performance. So instead of your CDS service specifying or like effectively making the queries to the FHIR server themselves, what you do is you specify the queries in the prefetch. So whatever is making the request to your CDS service can pre-populate the data that you would require for it. Okay? Rather than you using whatever data has been given to you to call the service yourself. Okay? So this is where your FHIR knowledge will come in handy. But before we do populate the prefetch, let's just go ahead and return a, let's say a hard-coded response, okay, to be able to display a card. So we return to the CDS hook specification, and we're going to take a look at calling the CDS service, and we are going to be looking for the CDS service response. Jumping to here. So you're meant to return an object that is containing a cards array, okay, and you would return 200. So this is what the response should look like. Cards are required. So let's come back here. Cards, array of objects. What should a card look like? A card should have a summary, which is required, an indicator, and a source. And source is an object. The other two are strings. So let's just quickly get the summary in. Let's say this is hard coded. And indicator, as far as I spoke about, if you tuned in earlier, you would have seen me talk about the indicators, info, warning, and critical. This is how you get to see which column you're displaying it in. So you have effectively growing urgency from information, warning to critical. Just to be a little bit different, we're going to go with warning. Okay, so our hard-coded card is going to be warning. Let me pop this over to the middle of the screen. And the final attribute that we want will be the source attribute, okay, which is going to be an object. And here's the structure of the source attribute. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. We have a label that is required, and the rest is optional. So label, and maybe to talk, if you go to the specification, you're going to be able to read and see what all of these attributes are trying to indicate and how you should use them. Source effectively tells you where did this card originate from. So this originated from my service, okay? Or, you know, if you're going to be OpenAI, you would probably put OpenAI here, and then you would have something like your OpenAI icon here, your business icon, the URL to your business website, etc. Okay. So coming back to the card, summary, indicator, source, and the rest is optional. So we've effectively fulfilled the requirements. Let's come back to the code. I'm going to stop the service, start it again. Come back here to MelderX, give it a refresh. And here you will see you have number 2, but the color goes to orange. That's because now you have a warning card here, okay? And we have our hard-coded text here. Cool. So we've effectively gone through like this very minimal setup of, we have a service which now returns a hard-coded card. All we have to do is call the service, and if EHR is following the CDS hook spec, you're going to be able to get your card into the EHR. Okay. Now we've effectively got to build a little bit on it and what's it called? Arrive at a point where we are launching a smart application. Okay. So I think first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to work on the prefetch data over here and effectively fetch some information about, from the FHIR server that we have. So in the context, we are going to have the patient ID, and the context is very special in that the CDS hook in the prefetch template describes how you can populate a query using the values in the context dictionary and then have the results available under a key. So the prefetch object is your way to say, I want this FHIR query to execute and effectively have this document or these documents. So you can either get your document, you can effectively have only one FHIR resource there, but the resource can be a bundle. Okay, so you can have a patient, an observation, or a bundle, which will contain multiple resources. So we're going to start with a single resource, and we're going to try to query for a, let's say, we want our patient, and it's going to be patient, and from the context, we want to template the patient ID. Okay, let's go ahead and restart this. Come back. So we do cache this definition for 1 minute. So sometimes it may be available instantaneously like it is now. Sometimes it may take a minute to update, right? So every single time somebody is calling this service, or we want to rediscover if the service is still available, we're not constantly bombarding your service with requests. Okay, so I've added the query for the patient. I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and again, same result. So it seems like nothing has gone wrong. And now in the body, in the prefetch, you will get your patient. Okay, and now we can do an official patient greeting card, which now looks at the data and does something based on it. Okay, so let me remind myself, we have a prefetch patient on the body. So request body prefetch patient. Okay, and oh, I didn't mean to go there. We are going to have name, which is an array, and you're going to have a bunch of things there. So let's just say first name, patient, name first, given 0. And then in here you will have family name. Let's say second name. So instead of hard-coded, we are now dynamic, where we can say hello, first name, and we can have second name. Okay, I think that's it. So let's give it a go. So I'm just going to restart the application, come back over here, give this a refresh, alerts, and there we have it. So we now effectively have a service which is functioning against FHIR data. Okay, so now we want to push a little bit more on the prefetch and see exactly how we would query perhaps some of the other data. So let's say I'll take a look at the conditions. Okay, now that we're working with FHIR, it is very useful to have your FHIR documentation handy. If I want to query for conditions, I would go to resources, or actually, sorry, documentation, search parameter registry right over here. And I would search this page for condition. If you have other ways that you're navigating this documentation, by all means do that, but this is the way I do it, right? So here I have all of the search parameters available for the condition. So I'm going to look for all conditions that belong to this patient. Okay, so coming back to the prefetch, I want my conditions, and on here I will have conditions. It was the patient parameter, and again I'm going to populate it with the patient ID. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and refresh the service, come back over here, verify with my workspace that the conditions have been updated, and it was probably a mistake here. It's just I think FHIR just wants condition. It's not going to work with conditions. So perhaps I made a mistake there, but it's not something I remember. Okay, so I'm going to refresh here. Not much should change here, but yeah, unable to get cards list, potentially because of that mistake. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove the S here, restart the service. Ouch, it started. I expected like a bigger message. Ooh, your service has started. Okay, let me go ahead and refresh. So here you can see it's still unable to get cards, potentially because the service hasn't updated because of the 1 minute cache that I was talking about. So yeah, this is where I would slowly refresh and wait for it to change. If anybody has any questions at this point, happy to answer those.
So we have a few questions. Can I take this service and add it to my own front end?
The service is effectively an API. So if you want to host it and call it, you can do that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of praise on CDS hooks. CDS hooks are legit. They've done a great job in maturing the spec. And someone, Sanjay, also says, this is great. I have no idea how advanced CDS hooks had evolved.
Yeah, we've actually recently participated in the CDS Hooks Connectathon, where people are talking about what's next, and we've already taken some steps for that. So, and I'm going to be doing the demonstration of that shortly. So, yeah, but CDS hooks are pretty amazing.
Excellent. Any other hackathon participants, if you have questions, just put them down in the chat. I think we already have a good amount of questions, but we don't see anything specifically technical.
Okay. Yeah, it updated, so if you want to continue.
Yeah, I think we should carry on. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So the cache is updated. We have the condition with the patient. Now, if I give this a refresh, everything loads. So things are successful. And here in the code, in the logs, I can see that I have my conditions, 36 of them. If I come back here to view all data, and I have a look at the condition, there's 36 of them. Okay. So we can do maybe another one to just kind of, let's say, what's a good one? Medication, right? So same thing with the medication. Do we have a way to identify?
So quick question, Anton. I think I missed this one. So Vishweshwar Rao asks, it will be helpful if you can talk about the use of prefetch in CDS hooks and also different types of cards. I think the different types of cards were covered. Prefetch, do you plan on covering it here as well?
So, well, the prefetch is currently what we're going over. The significance of prefetch, I briefly talked about it in a sense that once you are basically the CDS hook supports the functionality of sending you the information of which FHIR server you should retrieve the data from. So it would give you the link to the FHIR server, it would give you the access token, and the CDS hook service would retrieve data from there. The significance of the prefetch is to address the performance issue in the amount of network calls that you would have to make. So network calls are, I would say, infinitely more expensive than going to your memory or going to your local cloud service. So in our case, we are in Azure, so we have our FHIR server next to our database. The call would be a lot faster than effectively sending a FHIR server and an access token to the CDS hook service, and then the CDS hook service going back to us to retrieve that same data. We could have already done the prefetch, send the data to you, whatever you needed to work with. Okay, so that would effectively cut the time in half. You're getting effectively 100% performance boost. Okay, I guess there's not much to say more. I don't think there's much to say on that. It's mainly a performance. A performance improvement mechanism, and the main reason why you want this to be performant is if a doctor is sitting there waiting for a card to appear, it's already a stressful environment. And something that we discussed in the hackathon is like the easiest way to get something like this as a specification shut down or get CDS cards to be disliked is pissed off practitioners who are sitting there and like, yeah, I heard about this CDS card stuff. It is really, really slow, right? You don't want slow things. You don't want to be clicking a lot of things. You don't want to get, you don't want it to impact your workflow. So you want it to be fast. You want it to be concise. You want it to be, easy to use, effectively, or rather simple to use.
Got it. To just summarize the point, so the prefetch avoids an API call, an extra API call that you'll have to make. And secondly, if you don't have any authentication, then you also have to authenticate first, then make another API call. So that's like multiple other API calls. It helps you get the data that you want straight from the EHR. Does that sum it up well, Anton?
Yeah.
Pawan, any comments here?
No, I was just going to say is like, again, we are talking a lot about alert fatigue and alert details, and this is why this is so important from a workflow perspective. Also, some things that we are hearing as we are talking to people is like prefetch will tell you what the service is actually trying to query. Many organizations, especially enterprise, will not feel comfortable if the token is going back there and the service is calling something on its own. So that's why we have kind of made it required right now is that prefetch is the only one we are allowing, because our goal here is to take the app developers and go to enterprises, and they can feel confident as they connect with CDSOs, so they know exactly what data is being shared with the service before they start.
Excellent. So keep the questions coming. I'll let Anton finish his demo and then I'll read everything afterwards. Yep, but keep the questions going in the chat.
Okay. So yeah, where do we leave off? We have the conditions. I think I wanted to fetch one more thing. I don't think the medications hold a reference to the particular individual, so I won't be able to query those. Actually, I don't think we need another resource. Let's just quickly do this. We have the conditions. We have the total. I'm going to go ahead and say, hello, you have, let's say, request, body, conditions, total, I think it is, conditions, total, yep, should be that good. Okay, so here's the new message. Now it works based on, and I forgot prefetch. And I will just put this here, so my code doesn't float off the screen. There we go. So we now have a patient, and we are capable of seeing how many conditions that patient has. Okay, coming back here, I'll just give this a refresh. And yeah, sorry, I never restarted my CDS service, so let me go ahead and do that. Restarted that. Give that a refresh, and you have 36 conditions. Okay. So yeah, so now what I wanted to do is if I pop back to conditions, or condition, sorry, find that here. So something that all developers love is time, dates, very easy things to work with. Let's say that you would like to express that you want conditions in the last 90 days. And this is a use case that we discussed during the hackathon. And how would you go about requesting that information, right? Currently, if we take a look at this prefetch over here, where we're specifying the patient, you could have your, let's say, if we come back here, and let me just double check that I have data with these parameters. So condition, let's say onset date time. So this would be 2008. And sorry, onset date time, abandonment date time. Let me just verify which parameter I want to use. I have recorded dates, and I have abatement. Sorry if I was saying that incorrectly. I don't know if I have onset here. Can't see it. And I have recorded date. So let me work with a recorded date. So the search parameter, I want a recorded date. Recorded date equals, and you could effectively start templating this yourself and saying, okay, get the current time, convert it to UTC, convert to the appropriate parameter, and effectively put it in here. Or you, what we've discussed during the hackathon is perhaps you would want this time evaluation to happen on the other end, and you can potentially do more things in the query or have some kind of logic execute here. And the way that you would actually do this is use what you have on the right-hand side here. If people are familiar, this is FHIR path. So you can also have FHIR path expressions, okay? So with FHIR path expressions, that you can evaluate them, and if it's your bog standard values like, well, let's say primitive values, you could effectively just evaluate the time, some kind of a number, you know, or a string. And you could do simple things like string concatenation. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use FHIR path evaluation to get some kind of time range to return different, what's it called, a different set of conditions. So here we have from 2008. I'm going to see if we have something else. Oh, okay, so we have 2019 condition, and we have 2017. So we have a couple. So if I want, now that I know that if I have 2008, if it's 2025 right now, if I do 10 years, this record should be discarded, okay? So 10 years is a good time for me to say, okay, give me all the conditions in the past 10 years, okay? So the expression here would be today minus 10 years, okay? And this would be the new query. And let me just verify that that's how it looks like. Yeah. Okay, let me restart that. Okay, come back here, give this a refresh. There's the query. Give this a refresh. There we have it. And now we'll see that we have 0 conditions. So the reason we have 0 conditions is because we probably don't have any conditions recorded at this specific date, because that's what I said equals, right? So I would have to say that it's greater than this date, okay, or less than this date. So let me give this a restart. Come back here. Wait for this query to update.
Again, while that is refreshing, there was a question in there that we could actually customize this for the cards to return based on present or absent conditions. So maybe there's a way to show that is like if there are no condition, if there are 0 conditions, no card is returned.
Yeah. So let's say depending on how you want to do this, let's say if conditions total 0, you would just have an empty array. Otherwise, if you have something to compute, you would return an array that contains cards, okay? And that would be your logic. Okay, so this query has been updated. Hopefully I know how to write it. And there we have it. So we now queried 29 cards rather than the 36. So you can see how you now get, let's say, more power in terms of what kind of query you can define and what kind of value you put in here. Okay. Oh, sorry. Apparently there is very bad weather incoming, so I'm getting an alert on my phone. Okay. So yeah, this is the, yeah. So a little bit more on FHIR path in the query. As I mentioned, over here in the context, currently for the patient view, you're getting very simple data in here. If you go to CDS hooks for each individual hook, you will be able to see what kind of data you're expecting in the CDS hook. For example, in the, which one is a good one? So order select, I think. So order select in the context, this is where wherever you are in the EHR, it would take care of populating this data for you. So for example, order draft, it would be a bundle of objects. This is where you can use FHIR path, and I'm not gonna show this, but I'm just gonna demonstrate this as a concept where, let's say you would have some kind of parameter. You could go to the context. The property would be draft orders, and the bundle has entries. And this is where you start going off type, condition, or some kind of resource, patient. You would select your first patient, and then you can go to the name, given, and now you're suddenly you're capable of customizing your query based on the objects supplied in the context as well. Okay, how useful that is going to be, not sure, but this is basically a way to get a standard for how you get a standard for how you populate this query, rather than having only these effectively hard-coded fields. So you only have user ID, you only have patient ID. No, now you can have an object with a bunch of stuff in there, and you can go about querying that object for things and populate that in your query. So it gives you infinitely more control over, what kind of query you can now create. Okay, so let me remove that. Just gonna quickly check. We're doing all right on time, yeah? Okay. Now let's take a look at generating links and effectively arriving at creating a smart app and doing a smart launch from MilderX. Okay. So back to the specification. I will take a look at the CDS service response, card attributes, and card attributes can have links. So I'll go over here, cards. Links are right all the way to the bottom. It's links is an array of links. So let's take a look at the link object. Come back over here. I'm going to add the links object array. Come back over here. So the object requires a label, what's called a label string, and a URL and a type. So the first three, these two should be self-explanatory. The type, you can either specify an absolute or a smart link. So we're going to start with an absolute link, just to give you an idea of how this works. We're going to have an object, a label, just say Google it, the URL, and then we have the type. Type was absolute, and URL, I'm just going to do the famous old google.com. Okay. Go with the comma. Okay. Give this a restart. Come back. Refresh. And here we have the link. So clicking on the link, it opens Google. Now we wanted to open a smart application, which CDS Hook supports. Okay. All you have to do is you have to say that, look, instead of a absolute URL, this is a smart link. Okay. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead, add another link. This is going to be my app. I will be hosting my app on HTTP localhost 4434. So I'm just incrementing one on the port. And the smart link, the type of the link is now smart. Okay. I'm going to restart the service. Give this a refresh, alerts, and now we have the smart app, the My App button. So I open it. My app is currently not running, but we can have a look at what we're supplying in the URL. It is very small, but you have two parameters. You get your FHIR server, which you are connecting to. So if it stops jumping about much is the FHIR server. Following that, you get the launch code. So the launch code is state that we generate on our EHR. And you effectively, with the issuer, with our FHIR server and our launch code, you effectively get some kind of a little token that says, look, you're referring to this state on our server, and using the FHIR server, you can come back to our FHIR server. So that is once you initiate the smart flow. Okay. So in order to use in order to create a front-end application, I can use just an HTML page, but I do want a JavaScript development server to serve this application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for Vite. Hopefully some people are familiar with this, and I'm just going to use this to generate a project. Okay. And perhaps if, because we're going to be transferring more into Smart on FHIR and Auth and OpenID Connect, maybe if people had some questions about CDS, more leaning towards CDS hooks and FHIR in general, maybe we can answer those now before we jump into the second part, and maybe we'll just have a whole different set of questions.
I got a question. I think Shahigin says that we have them available in Discord as pinned messages in the app competition channel. So
yeah. I think that was the question about the data. So there is a sample data set available, what we
Yes.
covered at the start. And again, you can use any data set. And just to build on that, so the competition doesn't restrict, actually, it doesn't need to be even just clinical resources. If you have any use case that you can build on any FHIR resources, you can use that. But obviously, like most of the EHRs are, especially in the US, are only supporting right now mostly US CDI. So we are encouraging, cases like disease prediction or length of stay or other clinical cases, what we are mostly seeing. But again, I mean, one of the things we are trying to do here is like if you have a use case, that can be some way that we can actually ask EHRs to share more data. But for the competition, you can actually upload any resources and kind of use them to create it.
So we have
the other thing I would also, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just you can continue. There's few other questions.
Yeah. I was just going to clarify again, as Anton showed, so the application, the competition requirement is that you can use it as a CDS hook or as an EHR launch. So Anton will be demonstrating now is like how you can actually combine both together. But if you basically have a current application and you are familiar with EHR launch, just as a standalone, that is also supported. So again, these are different use cases. We are trying to understand, kind of what kind of apps are out there. CDS hooks is obviously what we think, because of the, alignment with the workflows is the best technology in here. But if you have a smart on FHIR EHR launch, that is also acceptable. Both are also acceptable as part of the competition.
So there's another question. I think it was answered in the chat, but just for the people who are watching, can you also add conditions in a CDS card. Let's say a patient has high blood pressure and the doctor needs to know about this.
Yeah. So if you could share my screen.
Again, he's clarifying by conditions, I mean comparing values and only showing the card if applicable.
Yeah. So if you could share my screen, I'll show you where this happens. So here we have the app post, right? So this is where the data about the patient and the conditions is submitted to you. So you can see here what I'm doing is based on some kind of logic, and here I just have a ternary operator. So if the conditions is 0, I'm not going to return a card. But if I have one, I'm just going to return this very, very simple card. You can write, so this is effectively your app logic goes here. So however you choose to compute the conditions that you received, or for that matter, whatever resources you asked for in the prefetch, however you choose to compute them, you can generate whatever cards you want. Okay, so you have a choice of generating 0, 1, or more cards based on your application logic. Okay.
Definitely helps. So yeah, I think we just have another comment about wheat or white. I think wheat. I love wheat. Will this coding be in GitHub after the recording? That's another question.
Yeah, of course, we can provide a link.
I think I will put it on Discord.
Yeah, we can. Yeah. Will this video, I guess, be available as one big recording after?
Yeah. I think I can add it to that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. So yeah, it will be available in the description then.
Yep. I think we can carry on.
Okay. Cool. So let's come back here, and I'm going to generate a Vite application. I'm not going to be using any of the frameworks. I'm just going to be using vanilla JavaScript, and so I'm going to come back over here. New terminal. Let's wait. I'm just going to double check that I am in root. So I'm going to create a smart app. Vanilla JavaScript, no TypeScript. I'm going to cd into my smart app. And by the way, ngrok still running in a different terminal, and my CDS service is running in a different terminal as well. One thing I wanted to edit is my application is going to have many routes, right? You may have your callback, your launch, your patient view, your homepage, landing, etc. Many routes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, look, there is going to be a route where I want you to hit the launch code, a sequence, effectively. Okay. So let me go ahead and refresh the CDS service. What I'm going to double check before I start developing my front-end application is the link that is being generated in the alerts for my app is sending me to /launch with the following parameters. Okay. And it is on 4434. Okay. So in this smart application package.json, where I am going to be launching the Vite application, I'm just going to say that I want my port to be 4434. Okay. Coming back over here, it's npm install everything, so all of the dependencies. So we got the node modules folder that is now installed, npm run dev. And there we have the application 4434. I'll give this a reset, and there we go. So this will be the default application. I'm going to remove most of this from here. So you have the public folder with some images in there. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. I'm going to take a look at this index.html page, which is what gets served to us. The SVG, I'm going to delete it. So if you understand the HTML and JavaScript, this is basically all the knowledge that you need. You have your HTML. It loads a JavaScript file. Here's this main.js, the main JavaScript file. You can see it's a very, very primitive application in a sense that all it does is it just writes HTML in a JavaScript file rather than in the HTML file. I'm going to remove all of this, and all of the other styles, icons, I'm going to remove them as well. So the only variables that we really have here is, look, I'm displaying this page, and I have this JavaScript that I'm about to work with. In here, I'm going to have super simple logic of checking the location, path name, are we on the launch path? I'm also going to have the callback path. And for both of these, I will just console log the location. Okay. So if I give this, if I open up the console here, I give this a refresh, you can see that we're now console logging the location, and I can take a look at my search parameters over here. Okay. So now we want to initiate a smart launch, a documentation that I haven't actually opened. So let's do smart launch, add FHIR to it, and we are going to have the smart launch documentation here. So maybe we just go to overview here. So we can do a smart app launch. So you can either launch from an EHR or you can launch your app on its own. When you're launching the app on its own, it's a standalone app launch. When you're launching an app from an EHR, it's an EHR launch. So when you are launching an app from an EHR, and this is what we're doing, we're effectively launching your app and we're attaching the issuer and the launch parameters. Then on the following request, the redirect that you're doing from your app then is you have to pass your issuer, the FHIR server that you want to connect to, as the audience, and the launch code that you have just received as the launch. Okay, if you're doing standalone, you're not going to have this launch. You're not going to be able to provide it here. Okay, so because Smart on FHIR is built on top of Auth and OpenID Connect, you're going to need a JavaScript library that is handling all of that. So for this, you're going to look for the OIDC client TS. This is the latest and greatest, I think, in JavaScript that is used for all things auth. And if you're a beginner to this, this is a very steep learning curve. However, if you're familiar with this, you should be fine. But if you don't know anything about auth, if you don't know anything about OIDC, it's a steep learning curve, and I would recommend go and read the original auth specifications. So just how there is a specification for saying, look, a CDS hooks is a service with such and such endpoints. The auth specification says there are such and such endpoints and such parameters, and this is how you go through this protocol. Okay. So again, this is just an implementation of the specification, just as what we're doing with the CDS hook service. Here in the code, we are implementing the specification. Okay. Otherwise, these documents are abstract. So I'm going to go ahead and install this into my application here. I'm going to stop it, npm install OIDC client, and I'm going to run it again. Okay, so once this is running, maybe I'll try to follow the documentation. We're going to do the authorization code grant with proof key code exchange. Actually, this just explains the flow, which I don't understand why they have this here then. That if you read the specification, you're going to get that information. Here's another piece of documentation they have, which explains how to actually, which objects you want to use within the library in order to get what you want. So from my personal experience, you want to pay attention to this, where you have the user manager. This is a higher level API, which says, this is how I'm working with my user. OIDC client says, this is how I work with the protocol. So user manager is higher, OIDC client is closer to the protocol. Okay. So I'm gonna show the difference between the two a little bit, but for now we're just gonna start with the user manager. So we're gonna instantiate a user manager, and we'll also want to import the user manager from the OIDC client TS. Okay. Once we have the user manager, we will want to call a sign-in redirect. Okay. So for now, I will comment this out, or actually, let's take a look at some of the parameters that you can have here. So for example, you will have extra query parameters, which are going to be extra query parameters that you want to include in your redirect URL. Okay, once you're redirecting for that authentication. Because this app will need to access MelderX, you want this app to be registered with MelderX. It's the way that Auth works, is that you have a platform, you want to access data into it, you have to register it as an app before you can go through an authentication flow with it. Okay. So we're going to go back to our MelderX account here. I'm going to go into apps and I'm going to register an application. This is going to be a provider application. So my CDS Hook Smart app. It's a public application. It lives on the internet. It cannot hold a secret. And it will want the OpenID profile. And there are a couple of launch scopes. Launch is the one for EHR launch. If you're doing standalone launch and you want launch patient and launch encounter, for these two, this is when you're asking, look, when I'm doing the standalone launch and I'm redirecting to the EHR, I want the EHR to allow me to select the patient or an encounter before coming back to my app to have that context. Launch, you're saying, I'm going to come to you with a launch code that I want you to handle. Okay. And I'm just going to want to access all of the patient information. Probably better with a patient start.read, but I'm just going to do all of it. Okay. Redirect URL, HTTP localhost 4434, and I said callback. Okay. We do allow EHR launch apps on their own, which are different. They're very similar to, you have a button to launch your app from the context of a patient, but it's something that appears beside the patient over here. So it functions like another extension. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but just know that if you want to just have a launch application without a CDS hook, so you can have that as well on this platform. Okay. So here's the app. So we filled out just the name, public, scopes, and the redirect URL. This has nothing to do with linked workspaces, and that's all we're going to do here effectively. We're just going to have the client ID here, and now we want to start populating our app with this configuration. Okay. So this is all going to go into this user manager. So you're going to have your configuration object over here, and you're going to have your client ID. You're going to need your redirect URI, which I have specified over here. I'm going to go back to the app, grab the redirect URI, specified over here. This is where we're going to process the code that it's going to give us to get the token. And one more thing that we're going to need to specify here is the authority. So who is going to be dealing out the tokens? That is going to be MelderX. Okay. So app.melderx.com is the authority. Scopes may vary depending on if you're doing a standalone launch or a EHR launch. In this case, we're doing the EHR launch. So we will do OpenID, profile, launch, and patient, start. Okay. For now, I will actually comment this out, and I will try to populate these extra query parameters. Okay. So it's going to be an object that I want to populate based on my location. So hopefully people still remember on our Vite application, we have the location, and in the search, we're going to get the parameters that we have in the query over here. Okay. So because it's just a big string, I'm going to have, well, it's a query string. So I'm just going to have to do a little bit of string manipulation to extract the values out of it. And do note, according to the specification, again, issuer, where I was looking, let me close all of these CDS hooks here, the Vite documentation, and just on the launch, right? So we're launching with issuer and launch, but then once we're actually redirecting for the authentication, we want audience and launch. So issuer will have to get rewritten as audience. Okay. So we are gonna have what are we gonna have? We're gonna have the location. It was search, and maybe I don't see a lot of people do this, but you can use the JavaScript console to actually develop this as well. So if I make this a little bit bigger and you have the location and you take a look at the search, there it is. You can effectively do something like, look, I want to split by the question mark and get me the second entry, right? So this is currently what it looks like. I will then want to further split by the ampersands, okay? And now I'm gonna have 2 entries, okay? For each of those entries, so entry, I'm gonna have a equals separating the key and the value. So again, I'm just gonna split this by the equals. And now I have an array of arrays where I have key and value pairs, okay? And now I can use this to effectively, let's say, query params and iterate over them. I think it's there's for in and for off. I think we're going to be using the for off. So one entry in query params that we managed to extract over here. The entry is going to be an array. So for example, entry 0 is going to be the key that we want to assign to entry 1. Okay. And in the end, console log, extra query parameters, come back over here. And so from the location, we get this object, which if we supply as extra query parameters to this sign in redirect function, the OIDC client library that we have downloaded is automatically going to take care of mapping these extra query parameters to the query parameters in the route. Okay. One thing here, again, with the issuer, if this is going to be the issuer, we will actually just want to rewrite it to audience. Otherwise, the launch code, just keep that as is. Okay. So now I have the audience and the launch, and they're ready to be attached to the redirect request. Okay. Let's go ahead and get rid. Actually, let's keep this console log there. Sign in redirect. That's where we initialize the redirect. I'm actually going to hide the terminal so you can see the code a little bit clearer. There it is. Let's refresh. So I refreshed and I already landed on effectively the consent screen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close this so you can see what this looks like from the beginning. So we get the app. I'm going to go ahead, open my app. We are landing on the /launch and we're getting redirected to the consent screen. I'm now going to go ahead and allow access. Now I'm on the callback with the code, and the code can be used to exchange for an access token, and I can use the access token to get data from the API. Okay. So this location log comes from this part. So now we're effectively just in a different branch of of the logic that we're executing for our super complicated application. What do we want to do here? We want to go to the user manager, and we want to use this OIDC client library to process the code into a token. For this, we're going to use the sign-in redirect followed by the callback. So whatever method we used to initiate the redirect flow, we're going to use that to prefixed with the callback. Okay. This is going to return a promise. We're going to have a then, and I think this returns you a user, and we can console log this user here. Okay. So there we have it. So again, by calling this function, this is what's going to extract the code from the URL, exchange it for a token, and then finally, once it does that, it's going to initialize a user, and this is the user object that you see in the console here. So you have your access token, you have your ID token. You don't have a refresh token because you haven't asked for it with the allow offline access. Something that's missing here that you get in the network request for the token. So for example, response, you have the patient parameter here. So as part of the smart launch, some of the contextual information that you can get here, so described somewhere over here in the response of the obtaining an access token in the response here, you may get additional information, right, based on what patient you were launching, etc. This is where, if you're working with the user manager, it's not FHIR specific. You are losing the things that are closer to the protocol level. So if you're going to be using, if you want to be consuming everything that is available in these requests, this is when you want to come down closer to the protocol and use the OIDC client. And the OIDC client will have a lot of similar functions. So for example, create sign-in request, not as simple as redirect sign-in, and then you have the process sign-in response, which is not as simple as redirect sign-in callback. Okay, but nevertheless, if you want to start working with the parameters that are closer to the protocol, like the patient, you would defer to using the OIDC client. Okay.
And just a quick, so we have 5 more minutes and we are on time. So just a few general questions that I got. So Ajay asks, please pardon my ignorance. Can MeldRx act as a FHIR facade to a remote API-based CDR? So I'm assuming the question is around, can it connect to another CDR, which is not Epic or Cerner or these big ones? Maybe.
Yeah, so we don't have it as a facade like right now where it can, connect it, but like we do have what we call as a linked workspace, where it can connect to another FHIR API and actually connect the two FHIR APIs into a single FHIR API. That's actually how we integrate with, all the EHRs. So I don't know what the intent, like the question is, are you planning to use us as a layer above the existing database? So there are ways we can do it, but it's not kind of what the core purpose of the platform today is.
Thank you. So yes, Anton, I think we can quickly get your demo. Let's see where we can go. And again, this will be recorded and you will be able to see this on both YouTube and LinkedIn as well. So we still have close to 35 people who are with us. So yeah, Anton, I'll leave it to you.
Okay. I guess, so where did we leave off? We effectively have the access token. So whatever user we have the access token over here. Now all that's left is to call the API, and the purpose here is really, you have your card, which is limited by what you can show in the card is limited by the specification. Once you're displaying a card, warning, based on my service, whatever my service executed, you have this so-and-so condition. And perhaps EHR doesn't have the facilities to inspect or visualize the data in some kind of manner. It cannot present pie charts. It cannot present a graph. So this is where you would initialize your smart launch, and you would query that data. And now a person using your app can now visualize that data in a different way, or fill out some kind of order, etc., and push that data back into the EHR if it supports that. Okay, so let's maybe do a quick little fetch here. Let's see where it'll do a fetch. Actually, let me do. Then here we're gonna have const access token, user access token. Gonna fetch to the, and I think we lose the audience in the process as well due to using this, what's it called? Due to this parameter, yeah. Otherwise, maybe we have some like, I think maybe actually somewhere in the access token. No, right. So what I'm going to do is I cannot remember where you would grab this information from specifically, but I'm just going to grab this URL here. And I think it was API FHIR. And this is where I'm not extremely familiar with the fetch API. We would need an object. I think body. Actually, body we don't need. We would need headers. This is going to be an authorization header, bearer. Access token. So we would want the condition. So we would get a response here. Something like that, res JSON. And so this, I think here we get a bundle. And let's just go ahead and console log this bundle. I think maybe missing a content header, but I'll expect this to work with JSON. So yeah, we're going straight to our API and querying for conditions. Ideally, maybe somewhere along the way, we can record the issuer, the audience, and seed that, effectively seed that with this value. All right. I think that is it. Yeah, let's come back over here. I'll give this a refresh. No matching state found on the callback. Let me do this. On the else, I will actually take all of this, place this here, and I'll remove the fetch here and the access token here. I will location, because the library actually saves all of the states in the, what's it called? In local storage. If I just go ahead and redirect to root after I have processed it, I should be able to just go ahead and get the user and perform the same action here. Okay. So let me go ahead and relaunch the application. I'm going to go through the consent screen again. And here I have the object with the entries, right? And I would go through the same pagination. So the conditions that I'm querying here are not filtered by the patient. So I'm effectively able to get all the conditions that are currently in the FHIR server, because I have uploaded a couple of exactly a couple of patients. I'm currently querying both of their conditions, but this is again where I'm a little bit short on time. But you would go down to the OIDC client, and you would record the contextual information about the patient that you have opened. You would record the contextual information of the FHIR server that initiated the launch. You'd save that in the storage, and then you would bring that up during the course of, you would bring that information up during the course of your application, and you would make the appropriate queries. But yeah, by default, if I quickly take a look at application, not cookies, I think it will be the storage. You will see nowhere here does it store that information of which patient was launched. So this is something that you may use yourself, or I think Josh Mandel is working on a FHIR library as well that allows this. So you may use OIDC client, you may use a different library, but just understand that all of this information should be available in the actual network requests. And as long as you're able to get in the way of that network request, read that information, you can store it and retrieve it for later use. Can I use Firebase as authentication? Not for this. So the user would have to exist in the EHR. So the doctor, which is using the EHR, if the EHR is built on top of Firebase, then yes, you will be effectively authenticating with Firebase. But it is whoever the identity provider is has to support the Auth and OpenID Connect and the Smart on FHIR protocols, so you can actually authenticate with them. Okay.
Yeah, there was another question. I'm based in London and my hospital uses Epic. Can I access my actual medical record to test? I don't know how it works, on London side, but in US you definitely can. And I guess the functionality is available. We can check it. Sidharth, do you know, like by default, a patient can actually get it from NHS or depending on the system?
Not sure, because again, each NHS trust has their own setup, and it's quite a mess. So
Yeah.
Epic technically has this functionality, but then whether it's enabled in the institute is another question.
Okay. Yeah. So to just kind of again summarize, and again, if there are any questions, our goal here was to give everyone a good perspective of like exactly what CDSOX is and how it works from the competition perspective. But if you have any other specific questions, please feel free to reach out to us or in the Discord channel. I did want to clarify one thing, because this is something we have heard a lot is like, what exactly are the predictive AI apps and what is allowed or not allowed. So I want to clarify that we are not expecting you to have basically a very well-defined model that is completely built in there, where the data and everything is already kind of filtered out. Even if you have some concept that you're using basically a model, because our idea here is that these applications can be used by enterprises where they might want to actually fine-tune it with their own model. So if you have an idea where you can use any kind of AI, whether you are making it ultimately back call to an LLM or building a custom model, the idea here is where Anton showed that how you can go get the conditions, you basically will have some custom logic in there. So as long as you can fit the rest of it in that idea and you have an idea where to use some kind of predictive AI, it is absolutely valid for the competition. And if you have further questions, just reach out to us. We are working very closely with many of the participants to help them fine tune it. Because our goal really here is to find out what kind of apps are organizations looking like, or what are the opportunities in here. So.
And again, to finish it off, I'll just make sure that everyone has a link to register if you haven't. I see a comment on where can I find general info on the competition submission due date. So you can check out the just meldrx-predictive-ai.devpost.com. I will also put that in the comments here and include this in all of the descriptions. You can register here and again have like 38 more days to go. Still quite a lot of time, I would say. We have like 1,300 participants. Yep.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Anton, Pawan, anything else you want to cover?
No, we'll share the source code. If there are any other questions, again, reach out to us. I'm looking forward to hearing from a lot of you.
Right, perfect. So thanks a lot again for staying this long. We still see so many of you here. So again, reach out to Pawan, reach out to Anton, join their Discord, and yeah, looking forward to seeing really good apps built. And hopefully, Anton's demo gave you an idea of how you can build this yourself. But even if you don't use Node.js, it's the same concept. You can use a different programming language. Yep.
Thank you so much, Sidharth, for hosting.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Okay. I